Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 3 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. My name is Lori Beth Goldman, and I go by Lori Beth on Facebook. And I am a psychotherapist, healer, and a coach, and I am on fire about transformation and consciousness and anything having to do with awakening and freedom. And I have been interested in this since I was a very, very young child. I came into the world that way, and I have been totally geeking out about it and practicing and studying for many years. And so I am over the moon excited to be hosting this show and bringing on incredible healers, coaches, and teachers who are talking about transformation. And when we talk about on this show in terms of talking about transformation and healing and awakening, what we're really talking about is not doing those things for the sake of having or getting, but doing those things for the sake of having more of ourselves, clearing blocks that are getting in the way of us being our full selves, and of also that are not allowing us and the planet to thrive and in the ways that we are needing healing right now. So, so obviously sometimes a natural byproduct of doing this work is that we do get the things that we want in life, or things do come into alignment, but this show is all about that not being the goal. And so every single week I have different people on here exploring different topics that have to do with transformation. And this week I have the pleasure of having Sydney Culver come on the show. So I'm going to have her join now. Oh, here we go. And then I will introduce her. So here she comes. Welcome, Sydney.
Hi.
So wonderful to have you here.
It's wonderful to be here. Let me just get my camera where it needs to be.
Yeah, hopefully mine's okay too. Great. Ooh, the volume just is doing something. Whoa. Okay. I've had some technical difficulties. All right. So I'm really excited to have Sydney on the show. Sydney is a coach and a healer, and she has several different titles that I'd love to introduce her by, because all of them are extremely powerful and exciting. She's a feminine and masculine empowerment coach, so she does a lot of work with men and women. And she's an epic space holder, which hopefully she'll say more about, a little bit about what that means throughout the show. And she is also an emotional alchemist, which is probably not the most relevant, but it is very relevant for the show today, because we are going to be talking about the gold in the darkness. We're going to be looking at the topic of darkness and the topic of going into our shadows and our wounds, and what the fruits and the jewels are that are found there, and why we resist them often, and what are the best ways through, and so that we can actually do this really powerful and important work. So I'm going to hand it over to Sydney. Is there anything you'd like to say, and just saying hi to our viewers before we start?
I'm just really excited to be here and to have the opportunity to really explore a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is just, at the core, like really learning to fully be with all of ourselves, and really learning to embrace all of ourselves and embrace really what's here and what's so.
Beautiful. Lovely. I'm really excited for this topic as well. It's very near and dear to my heart and to the work that I do. So this is probably one of my all-time favorite topics. So really excited to dive in.
Mine too.
Wonderful. Yeah. So So just to start, I wanted to ask you to give our viewers a context for who you are and the work that you do, so that yeah, we can sort of know the
Yeah.
terrain that we're in as we begin to explore the topic.
Yeah. I think one of the favorite ways that I like to describe myself, as you said, is as an epic space holder. And I work really with like just being so deeply present and tuned into my clients and what's really there for them, and being able to really see beyond what they can see in themselves and see the corners that they've hidden from themselves, and both really hold them in their like their power and their divinity and their like highest potential, while also fully seeing like the range of maybe what's been denied or suppressed, or a shadow, or just something that hasn't been claimed or looked at, not for just because it's in a blind spot. And so my work is really about holding a container to create freedom, to create connection, to allow them to step fully into who they are by claiming all of themselves.
Mm.
And I often, work with the lens of the masculine and feminine, both like as an external piece, like working with, empowering women to be more in their feminine, and, in empowering and inviting men to step fully into their masculine, but also that masculine and feminine is very much alive inside of us, like, and how we actually navigate these inner
Mm.
territories.
Mm.
And so it's a very much an inner outer dance for me. And then the emotional alchemy, as we're really going to be talking about today, is like, the process of, turning that emotional lead, if you will, into, the gold of our heart and our love and our power and our potential and all the things that we're meant to be. And that very process of that, inner journey, that descent through our own darkness, is what gives us the initiations. It gives us the wisdom. It gives us the courage, and it gives us like all that we need to actually be able to be the person we're meant to be. Like there's a reason we're just not like handed over, like our full self from go. Like there's a journey to claim that, and the things we learn in the darkness and the things we learn by facing those parts of ourselves is a huge part of what allows that capacity to be embodied.
Mm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just out of curiosity, the when you say that capacity, how would you define that capacity to be embodied?
Yeah, so like the capacity of our divinity, the capacity of
Mm.
our divine
Mm-hmm.
potential, and the capacity of the fullness of who we are, and to live, the biggest expression of ourselves that we can while we're here in being human on this earth, and that, you know, there's a lot of reasons that we don't, we forget that when we come here, and we forget that as we go through our
Mm-hmm.
journey, and we unlearn it, and then we have to unlearn what we've learned and remember who we are. And part of that is, this deep dive into our own being to really reclaim those parts of ourselves that for a myriad of reasons have
Mm-hmm.
been cast into the shadow.
So that we can be more fully who we are, and also
Yes.
hold space for the range of feelings and experiences that come, whether we perceive them as being really dark and challenging, or whether we perceive them as being really like blissful and peaceful.
Right. To be the full range of expression, the full
Mm-hmm.
spectrum of our being, like the totality of it in all directions. And
Yeah.
that both includes a willingness to, to turn and to look into the darkness and to face those fears and to face those crunchy places. And by doing so, that gets integrated, and that gets to then come along and be a part of how we show up and who we are. Right.
Mm.
Because otherwise it's in separation within us. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's in
Mm-hmm.
separation within us. And so, the process of, union and the process of oneness, like that
Mm,
process starts first and foremost, you know,
mm,
here. Like we
mm-hmm,
can't have that,
mm-hmm,
sense of unity and, non-separation in the outer world until we really have
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
brought those parts that are living in separation back into our hearts and we have a unity within.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we're sort of already, obviously, we've started into the to
Mm.
some of the fruits and the jewels, and I'm curious if you could even extend upon what you just said. I mean, I understand the obviously the more that we're able to hold this internally, then we can hold it in the world, and we can kind of hold that larger vision. And I'm curious if you can go a little bit deeper into like what it actually means to hold it internally, to be able to hold
Mm.
all parts and sort of what that does for our overall being. I mean, you've been using words like integration and divinity,
Right,
but
right.
just to even get deeper of like, what is that actually kind of, what's that inner journey and what's that inner experience like?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Just want to say hello to all the people. I'm seeing these names
Yes.
pop up, so thanks for joining us. Um, just be feel into like how I want to express that. So one of the first, pieces about learning to kind of, as you say, like hold that is a shift from, what is usually a default, and that is on some level we've judged, denied, suppressed, or we're fearful of something within, right? And so, and that's anything from like a part of ourselves that we maybe were told isn't right or isn't good, or that might be emotions or an emotional part of our spectrum that we've been told is too much, or that we has had judgment on it, or that might be like experiences that we were not able to fully metabolize at the time that they happened, for example, traumatic experiences. And so those are some of the bits that then get cast out, if you
Mm-hmm,
will. And so, learning to hold them is a process of first having the willingness to go and meet them, and to then, upon encountering them, rather than coming at them with the default like
mm-hmm,
of judgment, or the default of shame, or the default of I shouldn't feel this way, or whatever was the kind of reason they were cast out to begin with. If we're willing to go and meet them without that, and we are able to go meet them, you know, in a place of total embrace, and in a place of like
mm-hmm,
full willingness, and a full willingness to open to it. And then there's a transformation that begins to happen. And our ability to do that has a lot to do with, being able to like know we are not only that, and to really bring a witness to
mm-hmm,
that.
mm-hmm,
And then when we do, it's able to move. It's able to like
mm-hmm,
to be seen, it's able to be felt, it's able to be touched, and then it's able to be metabolized in some way. And those different pieces may respond differently. Those different pieces that I named at the beginning, like there's kind of a unique journey to go through with each of those individual elements. But more or less, when we bring our witness to them,
yeah,
we bring our embrace to them, we
mm-hmm,
bring our curiosity and our willingness and our openness to them, something which lived like frozen, or in the
mm-hmm,
shadow, or in denial, or in separation, like now begins to metabolize, to move, and to
mm-hmm,
integrate, to be felt, and go through an arc. Sometimes it just flushes out of our system. Sometimes there's like
mm-hmm,
something of ourselves that's reclaimed.
yeah, mm-hmm,
And with all of those instances, those, like on a more literal level, like those are all bits of our life force. Those are all bits of our
yeah,
energy that we otherwise are not able to use. It's like they're all being programmed in old
yeah,
programs, right? And so then we release that energy and that attention back into the present to be with us, to so there's a literal like,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah.
So that we're, well, and that last piece is so beautiful because then we're more able to be present to the moment and to what's happening now in life without living from this sort of subtle perception or past experience that's
Exactly.
ruling our life. That's what I'm kind of hearing from you. So that you can approach each new person or each new, um, obviously relationship or experience. We have more of ourselves, is what I'm hearing and what you're saying, but we're also able to approach it for what it is, what it
Yes.
actually is, and what's actually happening between us and another person or us in a particular experience. Mm-hmm.
Right. Right. And we have more, also more attention and energy to be able to focus on where
Mm-hmm.
we are going, what we do want, what we are present with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So this question gets a little bit more into the resistance, but I noticed that as I was hearing you talking, I was thinking about, you said um, three words that struck me: witness, bringing a witness to it, and embrace, and curiosity. And I love all of those because they all feel like they've got the different elements. It's like being that curious explorer, but also being the embrace to me is like the mother, the sort of like, okay, it's okay, and being with those parts, and the witnesses being able to actually potentially like just watch the energy and feel it. Um, but it brought up an interesting question for me, and this sort of goes into some of the ways we might resist. Um, I've noticed over the years in myself and with a lot of the clients that I work with or just friends that there can be a subtle agenda that comes in, or like a
Oh,
strategy, like, oh, I'm
totally.
being with this. So I could hear your words and I could be like, oh, that sounds so nice. And then I'm like as you're talking, it's like, oh, but then it moves. And I'm like, okay, but so many times in my experience, something doesn't move, right? And it actually just wants to be there for a long time, or there's just these subtle ways that I might be, resisting it, or it's like, oh, I'm going to be with it so that then it does move. And so
Yeah.
I'm just curious if you can speak a little bit to that and how you've worked with people around, those kinds of more subtle resistances.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. It's so true because it's so, like, well, for one, let's name that there is a lot of reasons that the structures that have been built, to
Mm-hmm.
protect us from feeling those things. There's a big agenda in the psyche, if you will, that we
Yeah.
not feel and face those things.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a big part of what constructs our ego. And it's like this beautiful guardian, right? That like it was constructed at the time to protect us from something, right? And so like like one of its jobs is to make sure we don't go there because going there felt threatening on a very deep level, like it feels deeply threatening to
Mm-hmm.
go there.
Mm-hmm.
It may have even been encoded with a life or death, depending on what
Yeah.
the trauma was, right? So, and so as we approach those places within us, that guardian comes up and says, you definitely don't want to do this. This is a bad idea. Stop, you know,
Mm-hmm.
go lay down, go eat food, go call this person, get on the internet, drink a drink, whatever the thing is. Like there's
Yeah.
just, like it's very, 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 very convincing. So I feel like, one of the ways of working with that is to just like name and acknowledge the guardian for the job that it's always
Yeah.
had, and to not resist the resistor,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, so that's one layer of it. And then what you're kind of speaking to, which is way, way more subtle, is when we're like, when we start to encode our witness with agenda, like
Yeah.
either like
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna like get over this real fast, or I should, like it sneaks in and gets encoded in
Yeah.
the witness. So it's not really a pure witness. It's like a witness with a little agenda, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, I feel like sometimes, when we begin this process, that's the value of having a space holder, having somebody be with us so that, when we're when that sneaky little bit is there that we can't quite see, sometimes we need an outer reflection that will, so I can feel that in my clients, and I can see that in my clients, and then I can help them, go below that. And I think over time, when you begin to see that, that possibility, then you can begin to also call yourself out on it. And, the curiosity piece and the embrace piece for me help to just deflate any of those agendas, because then it's just like open-ended, right? Like what's here, and like whatever's here, I'm going to be with, rather than those other sneaky pieces, which are very subtle sometimes, very subtle.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I'm really just appreciating the language that you're using for work that I've done for a long time, like even the guardian versus protector. Is that like there's something that feels like guardian, there's something that's very soothing about that when I think sort of using that to, as an even deeper honoring of that part, and giving it the space that it needs so that it can open, so that it feels like it's getting its needs met.
Yeah, and I find so often when it's just like acknowledged and honored rather than like fought against, right, or pushed, when it's just honored, it or sometimes we kind of have to like negotiate with it in a way. But like when we just bring that, I mean, really, all it is every layer that we meet, right, and that's often the first one that we meet. If we bring a compassionate, loving witness, that is, love is kind of the key that then opens all the doors.
Yeah. Just thinking about where I want to go next, because or we might want to go next, because I know that
we're covering a lot of territory here.
Yeah, we have covered a lot of territory in terms of I mean, you are speaking. I don't know if there's anything more you actually want to say on kind of why we resist. It seems like you've answered that, but I just want to give you an opportunity.
Yeah, I think I could say a little bit more about that. Like on a very base level of saying it is that like there is literally like those are experiences we resisted at some point in our life for a number of reasons, and oftentimes they are encoded with very, very painful beliefs about ourselves and about life. And for us to initially, when we had those experiences, or, to allow ourselves to fully feel the depth of that belief about ourselves or life, and to think that it was true might have, crushed us. It might have been annihilating, it was not okay to our survival, right? And so we have to have a certain degree of like a certain degree of self, like being in our center and knowing ourselves as something more than our pain body, in order to enter into those territories again, so that when we encounter those very painful beliefs, that when we live inside of that part, it feels like the most real thing, right? Like I'll never be loved again, or I'm not good enough, or, like I secretly am a failure, like these different tones that when we live inside of those, they're very painful, and they could threaten everything that we've built about in our identity structure that, isn't our true identity, but it's still the identity structure that we're identified with.
Yeah.
So, when we have enough presence that we can go and see, like, it's not true that I'm not worthy, or it's not true that I'm a failure, but like, I'm going to go ahead and feel the part of me that actually believes it, and hang out there. And I can do that because, I have enough of me that knows that like, that isn't truth with a capital T.
Yeah.
And then by doing that, like that resisted experience that's always lived in the background of my being is no longer resisted. Like, so it's kind of like it's gigas up, you know, because when we have that resisted experience, then there's a whole strategy that we have to
Yeah.
not feel it. And then there's a whole strategy that we have to get the need met that it believes it secretly can't have.
Yeah.
So when we are just willing to go into that resisted experience and feel it, not only does it potentially dissolve, but all of it, the gyrations and the strategies and the protector and like the whole matrix and
Yeah.
all of that just like, oh, it doesn't have a job anymore. It doesn't need to do that anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much. That was such a I'm moved by that description of that whole process, um, of just being able to meet even those belief systems. And it, I think you're speaking about it from the vantage point of the witness, or of, what is the truth, that, and we can say from, I mean, I'm imagining you would agree with this. We can say from that perspective that you obviously, like you're saying, have a part of you that somewhere knows this isn't me. And I'm thinking about the place where it intersects with also trauma theory and working with trauma, in terms of like, how do you create more resource or more ability to kind of have some of yourself be out of the traumatic or potentially re-traumatizing experience, so that you can actually feel it and go into it more. So you just linking the place where both of those kind of meet.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I that's not my language and I love
Yeah.
hearing those pieces and I think it helps everyone to, you know, to like be able to draw all the connections all the way through.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I was enjoying. I mean, I also think about it in the way that you're looking at it, and enjoying how everything is, like, all the different theories out there are talking about the same way. Like, you have to have enough ground, you have to have enough resource, you have to have enough of a witness, enough of a part that says, oh yeah, I do have parts of me that love myself, and that can hold myself to feel safe to go into the dark. If you have enough
Right.
of that, and some people really do. I mean, some people, that is the work, is actually to get them to the place where they feel like they have enough of that to even
Right.
begin to go into the darkness, because otherwise it's not, it's a re-traumatizing or unsafe experience.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you know, for me personally, like I developed that, you know, by you know, through spiritual practice, through meditation, and through the process of realizing that like my that I was not my thoughts and that I was not my feelings, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So like I was able to to
Mm.
disengage, like, because when we believe we are our thoughts and we believe we are
Yeah.
our feelings, then it's
Mm-hmm.
very difficult. But when we can get just even a little bit of a witness
Yeah.
to, you know, but I also feel like it's really important um, that we not just only stay in the witness.
Yeah.
Like we have to dance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When you say to dance, say the last part of that, to dance with.
Yeah. So you know, one framing that can be used is that, you know, like that witness is very much, you know, like a masculine part of our consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yes.
know, and so like, you know, when we like, there's a way that you can just like witness what's happening within you without actually kind of getting messy in it, right? Without actually going into the feminine descent of it. You know, like I
Mm-hmm.
can just like
Yeah.
be up here watching,
Mm-hmm.
you know, aware of my emotions without actually feeling them.
Yeah.
And that can, you know, that's not this, like the alchemy doesn't really happen then. You know, we're
Yeah.
just watching, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not actually, it's when the that part of us is able to go inside. So there's like, we can feel it while we're witnessing. We're not just in the witness, and we're not totally just lost,
Yeah.
absorbed in
Mm-hmm.
the feeling, and there's nothing else but what I'm feeling right now, and that's it. Like there's like, we have to have a foot in both our masculine and our feminine, and then that's where the dance is.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah. Yeah. And that also relates to the other ways that we were both talking about it before. So that's beautiful. And I also love that, again. I mean, I'm really appreciating your language in all of this, like the way that you articulate it, because even thinking about that. I know for me, I'm a language person. I know a lot of other, you know, a lot of the people that we work with are too. Um, but just here, it's like thinking about it as like a masculine, feminine dance brings me into further communion with myself when I think about,
Mm.
you know, opening further to these more, you know, to the darker, more wounded parts inside of myself. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of, for me, my entry point into this work was very much through my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have like necessarily like a language or a framework that was given to me. Like I very much like found my way in
Mm-hmm.
a, like through an incredibly soul shattering level dark night of the soul, which I'm sure a lot of the viewers here, have had very deep descents into dark nights of the soul. And for me, like it was like a very like, um, it was the darkest, hardest point in my life, and I was like almost so shattered I didn't even really think to ask for outside help at the time. I
Mm-hmm.
was in so much shame, and I had gone through such a deep, shameful shattering that like it didn't even come into my consciousness that I should go get some help. But it did come into my consciousness that I had to get myself out of hell, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was really easy for me to see like that I could um, armor armor to my own pain. I could shut myself off from my own pain, and it was easy for me to see that that was not a way out of hell, right? And so like
Mm.
instead of like armoring myself from the pain or pulling myself out of the pain or distracting, any of those, or getting jaded, or you know what I mean when I say armoring,
Mm-hmm.
when we don't feel, we armor, right? Like when we have a flood of feeling and we say we're not going to feel, we actually, like, we literally have to put on an armor. And it was really clear to me to see, like, if I do that, I'm going to stay in another version of hell. Like it will feel easier than what the current version that I'm in, but I'm still going to be in hell. So like my only choice then was like, how do I walk myself out? And I realized the way to do that was to open and to embrace like each piece that I came across on a daily basis, in a moment to moment basis, because during that time I was, very much like living like moment to moment, hour to hour, because like that was like I had to like play that mind game. I can get through the next hour. I can get through to the day.
Mm.
Like it was.
Mm.
I was in that on that level, and so it was like,
Mm.
okay, how do I meet the part of myself that's in this much pain, and how do I embrace it? And then
Mm.
I slowly walked myself
Wow.
through
Wow.
that journey, out of hell. And it was because I had some spiritual foundations. I was able to do that. But that's where I very much kind of like took my languaging, I'm just saying kind of experience rather than like I studied about trauma and then I applied it to my
Yeah.
life. And I could see very clearly that like if I just witnessed, like I learned so much in that process of like, if I just witness what's happening, that's not doing anything. Like I actually have to witness and feel at the same time. And that's actually what is freeing me.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what's moving this.
Mm. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, and I mean, I really get the sense as you share that and everything that you've been speaking about, that your way of doing this with people and your way of leading people obviously really comes from your own direct experience of finding the way out in an experiential way, and just how beautiful that is and what a beautiful offering that is to others. And I'm
Mm.
imagining that you're able to, even everybody's got their own journey through that darkness, right? Like even if we offer people tools, but I'm imagining that you're really able to support people to find the way that works best for them with all the different tools that you do have,
Right.
because you really kind of like, you did it by trial and error in your own experience. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and what happens, I think, for any of us who have had that kind of a journey is that, um, we're able to bear witness and hold space for that much more because we've bared witness and held space for
Yeah.
that in ourselves. And so,
Yeah.
you know, it carves out more space to be able to literally hold space for others.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's always so interesting for me. I mean, I shared this with you when we kind of before the call, but it's always so interesting for me to hear different people's through the dark because
Mm-hmm.
that was the only thing that I knew kind of from a
Mm-hmm.
young age, and just like such a high level of a dysregulated nervous system and complete overwhelm that and I kept just going straight into kind of, in trauma language you would say, I would go straight into the trauma activation over and over again. And so just such a different journey. Like I didn't have any
Mm-hmm.
ground. And so there was a lot of trying to go there and failing and sort of a lot of resistance
Mm-hmm.
um, to, a lot of resistance and a lot of having to learn how to hold myself, over the years, have enough ground to be able to face those dark, challenging parts, and hold myself through that with the help of other space holders as well and other modalities. So it's interesting to kind of, and I can see how then when people are resisting a lot, that's an easy, that's an
Mm-hmm.
easy road for me to work with people on. Like, oh, there's the resistance, or there's the way that you're, have an agenda, or there's the way that you have a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But also agreed that, it just that the states that, like, we haven't really said this exactly, but I'm sure I'll just say it and then see if if this is your experience. But this, for me, I feel like I can hold space for any experience that anybody has because I've been through it all myself. Like nothing phases me. It's actually easier to be within other people to some extent than it has been in myself. But so those places where people are like, oh my God, I'm going to go crazy, or, there's that like just dark image, or, really sort of terrible feeling. Um, just that as we extend our capacity, we're able to hold others in that same way. Um, and
Absolutely.
really be of service in that way, so that everyone, like you're talking about, so that we all stop sort of fighting the darkness and the shadows, which are inside of us, but which are also outside of us, and are also, as we're, if we're not looking, like, that's, in my opinion, that's where like so much of the violence and the darkness is happening on the planet, because we aren't able to be with it in ourselves. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, that to me, well, two things. One, the courage that it takes to be with those
mm-hmm.
parts of ourselves. I don't know that there's a more profound courage than that.
Mm-hmm.
And and then what is possible in our being, like what gets carved out in our being and our heart, and who we become, like when we aren't afraid to sit with anything, and we aren't afraid to be with anything, like that's such a profound freedom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
so much of what our fear always is, everything else then is fear, right? Like I don't, like, so much of what we're resisting is always a fear-based response to something. But when there's nothing that we're resisting anymore, like
Yeah.
there's no more fear,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
just a freedom. And that isn't to say that like it's always easy,
No.
right? But that is to say that, that the willingness expands,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the trust of the journey expands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because we titled this "The Gold in the Darkness," and what's coming up for me right now, and that is like the the courage to face the darkness is actually, it's the way out of suffering. So I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's the that's the main goal, right? That we then, like, because we suffer when we resist, and we're all, sensitive, empathic beings, and we're feeling everything that's happening around us and inside of us all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
I can I name a few of the other goals though that I.
yeah, please, and then yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
names.
So there is that the goal of being free from suffering, but also like when all of our energy isn't going into armoring and separation and fear and strategy and all of this, like, I mean, that's some actual gold that we get to spend other places,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
actual energy we get to spend other places. And the other thing that I want to name is
Mm-hmm.
that very often those places of, you know, the strategies that we learned to use to survive when they're no longer coming from our wounds are often the gifts that we then have to
Uh-huh.
share.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's a beautiful piece
Yeah.
too. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for naming that. That's so important. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. This has been a really just a very important conversation and very enjoyable for me, and I'm sure everyone who's been
Mm.
watching. And thank you for just all the wisdom that you're imparting on everyone. Um, it seems like you did. I mean, we could end. Gone a little bit over, and so I am thinking that it might be good to end. We could end with you. I don't know if there's any specific tools, even if you want to name like, two or
Mm.
three that you could leave people with in terms of, if someone's finding themselves in a place where they're feeling some kind of darkness or discomfort or something that they don't want to feel, and a way to begin to be with that and open to that.
Yeah, I think I'll just re-presence what we said earlier of like, you know, the witness with curiosity and embrace. And so, you know, to just notice like, are you resisting the experience you're in or having a judgment about it or, you know, like trying to get over it or not feel it and then just turn towards it. Turn towards it with the witness, turn towards it with curiosity, turn towards it with an embrace and you know, attend to it as you would if you saw
Yeah.
another in that
Mm-hmm.
space, and to you know, to cultivate the capacity to turn into it rather than managing or pushing it away or controlling or, you know, all the other gyrations that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Lovely.
and
Thank you.
yeah.
Oh, do you have?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So, I would love for people who watched this to know where they can find you and what programs you have coming up, what ways they could work with you.
Yeah, so probably the easiest way to find me is just through, you know, Facebook Messenger or my Facebook profile. And, you know, obviously my name is on this video. I'm also have an emotional alchemy course coming up that I'm teaching with a collaborator, Janae Rice, who's also a mental health counselor. And that's going to be a 6-week online course that actually starts next week. So if you really, if you know, if someone's interested in really learning the like how to's and the tools of emotional alchemy, that would be a great place to start. And then, you know, the last person you interviewed is a dear friend of mine, Zachariah,
Mm-hmm.
and he and I are going to be holding a container for men, a course for men, probably like late summer, which is, you know, a beautiful deep dive into like the holding space for the awakening masculine. So you can, that more information will be coming out about that, but the emotional alchemy course does start next week. And then Zachariah and I are actually going to be doing a live tomorrow if anyone wants to tune into that.
Great. You wanted to tell us what the live is going to be about, so that.
Yeah, so we did a live last week exploring kind of the current landscape of the masculine and feminine, but specifically like what's happening in the world of the masculine and men, and where are those evolutionary steps and what we see happening. And we had a lot of requests that we do that same talk, but more slanted towards the feminine. So we're going to be talking about some of those pieces as we see them in the collective and what's happening energetically and things like that. So
Okay.
yeah,
Lovely. Thank you so
yeah,
much. Thank you so much for being on the show.
yeah. Thanks for having me. It was real joy.
Yeah. Yeah. And once again, for everyone who's watching, my name is Lori Beth, and I am a transformational coach and healer. And I'm currently, I will have a group program in the fall, but currently I'm doing one-on-one work. And I do work, I basically am holding space for you to have big healings, and I do a lot of work with trauma and a lot of work with uh, clearing somatic and emotional blocks, and also how they relate to the clearing of core wounds. And obviously, and then I do a lot with helping you to regulate your nervous system, to sort of learn your specific nervous system and know how to be with yourself moment to moment, so that, like Sydney is talking, like we've been talking about today, so that you really can face all parts of yourself. And in doing so, you have more of you and more intimacy with life and more of a sense of freedom. So if you're interested in learning more about my work, feel free to reach out to me on Facebook. And yeah, this has been a really lovely conversation. This is happening. This happens every single week. So next week I will have someone else on the show, and we'll just be continuing along with amazing coaches and healers, and hopefully some of the people who came on, some of you guys who are coming on now, will come on again in other months, and we can just keep learning from everyone. Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.